happy Monday. Happy beginning of the week. I'm very excited to be here with you this week, pumping out the shows. A lot of great guests I've got joining me. I hope you had a great weekend. Welcome to February. Did that groundhog end up seeing its shadow or not? I'm not sure how to choose to live my life at this point without having that information. I've got a great guest joining me today. The great Jared Yates Sexton stops by. He'll also be joining us in Las Vegas, March 22nd and 23rd. I've got him committed to an hour on that Friday night with you, asking questions, having drinks. Looking forward to that as just one part of the events. We'll roll out more specific itinerary, but get your flight right now and buy your tickets for PodJam. It's the Stand Up with Pete Dominick PodJam. March 22nd and 23rd in Las Vegas. So many of you have announced that you're coming, told me that you're coming, and I cannot wait to meet you and have a great weekend. Please consider it if you haven't yet. Really looking forward to it. All right, well, how are you doing, California? The Drudge Report headline is Cali pounded 8 trillion gallons of rain. Potentially historic storm bearing down in California. Up to 7 inches of rain for Los Angeles. Bay Area winds were 80 miles an hour. I've asked you Californians to reach out and let me know that you're okay. Check in because that shit sounds crazy. So many of you listen out there and I'm very grateful for it. I hope that you're okay. Well, it seems I've started with headlines, but if you want to skip the news, you can start my conversation with Jared Yates Sexton at 24 minutes in today. But you don't want to do that. You want to stay here for the best news recap and all of the daily podcasts available to you. And thank you for your support at patreon.com/Pete Dominick. Let's start with the big news at the beginning of the weekend. On Friday, we learned the jobs report came in very strong jobs report, defying expectations on multiple fronts. The economy added 353,000 jobs during the first month of the year, well above the 187,000 that economists expected. The number of jobs added in previous months was also revised higher, and wage growth was better than expected, too. The unemployment rate stayed at 3.7% and has been under 4% for 2 years, the longest sub-4% streak since the late 1960s. If you don't count for 21 or 2022, which were unique and extraordinary for what I think is obvious reasons, the pandemic, 2023 was the best year for job growth since 1999. The report also put a shine on that job growth, and that's how we learn about the 2023. But in all, employers added 3.1 million jobs last year, defying predictions of a major slowdown. So that's huge news from Friday. And then over the weekend, we also learned the other big story is that in response to a drone attack that killed 3 U.S. service members at an outpost in Jordan on the border of Syria and wounded scores more last weekend, the U.S. has responded, targeting facilities and weapons used by Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and Iran-backed militias in Iraq and Syria. President Biden told reporters traveling with him to Nevada on Sunday that the strikes are working to deter and disrupt militant groups' operations in the region. Also marked the first time the U.S. has carried out strikes in both countries, Iraq and Syria, simultaneously. Target list included command and control centers, intelligence centers, rockets, missile and drone storage facilities, and more. So that is also a big development and a huge response from the president and the United States military to the deaths of those 3 soldiers. And by the way, did you see or hear the conversation between President Biden and the family of one of those soldiers? If you haven't, I'm not going to play it. It's just rough, but it is definitely worth watching. They were very appreciative of President Biden calling them, and he seemed to find all the right words in those moments, the consoler in chief. And speaking of President Biden, over the weekend, they had the South Carolina primary, had its Democratic primary, and apparently black voters in the state catapulted President Biden to the White House in 2020, showed up for him again. Read all about it. Interesting story there. I think Dean Phillips got like 3% and Marianne Williamson got a couple of percentage points as well. But President Biden ran away with the South Carolina Democratic primary over the weekend. And what else? Biden news. He's declined a Super Bowl interview for the second year in a row, which is a real shame. But they try to protect him so he doesn't go out and say the wrong thing and have that go viral. There can be no doubt about that. The Obama administration loved putting him out there. I'm pretty sure he never missed a year. And obviously Trump will go on TV whenever possible. Also over the weekend, sad news that I'm sure you know at this point, Carl Weathers, the NFL linebacker turned actor who starred as Apollo Creed in the Rocky movies and appeared in dozens of other films and television shows, died at the age of 76. I had the great honor and opportunity to interview him once. He was a real cool guy, super smart, thoughtful, funny, great sense of humor, and playful and nice and kind, and just everybody loved him. So that was real sad. I saw Stallone made a thoughtful video, testimonial to his friend, which is worth watching. Again, not going to play it for you here, but it was sweet. More news, more headlines, you say? I've got them. Tesla is recalling about 2.2 million vehicles because the font size on a warning lights panel was too small. Really? They can't fix their font size remotely? But that was interesting. There's a lot of Elon Musk news over the weekend as well. He has been parroting the great replacement theory, or that Democrats want people to come into the United States illegally and then somehow vote for Democrats, which is so sad and stupid and dumb and terrible that he is parroting that. Also reports that apparently from the Wall Street Journal that some Tesla board members felt pressured to take drugs with Elon Musk. And apparently he was told to go to rehab by his concerned friends amid fears his drug use was spiraling after he snorted ketamine and drank Molly water. Apparently his friends told him that he should go to his billionaire friend Larry Ellison's Hawaiian island to, quote, dry out from the drugs around the winter in 2022. And other friends had also expressed worry, this Wall Street Journal report says. And some of them asked him to go to rehab in the months after his acquisition of Twitter. Wow. Interesting reporting from the Wall Street Journal about Elon Musk. Enough about him. What else have I... Well, this is good news. An 11-day strike by teachers in a Boston suburb ended Monday night after their union and the school district tentatively agreed on a new contract. The walkout began January 19th, affected 2,000 Newton public school instructors in about 24 schools with some 12,000 students. It was the 6th teachers' strike in the state since 2022 and the longest closing schools for 11 days. In the country of Chile, wildfires have killed dozens and are threatening 2 large cities. Secretary of State Antony Blinken will return to the Middle East to continue negotiations on hostages and aid in Gaza. And a toddler got stuck in a claw machine while looking for a toy in an Australian shopping mall. And that is the headline I wanted to end on. Australian police came to the aid of a 3-year-old boy after he became trapped inside a claw machine at a suburban shopping mall. It's kind of my dream to climb into a claw machine and just conquer that claw. Take whatever the hell I want and get out of there. And so I admire that young boy. He's going places. And by the way, upcoming news this week, I like to try to find some of these things that are going to be happening over the next week on the first show of the week. Nevada primary elections this Tuesday. The state's Republican caucuses, however, are Thursday. The Supreme Court is going to consider arguments Thursday over whether Donald Trump can be barred from running for president under the 14th Amendment. I'll have a preview and recap of that for sure. Pakistan holds elections on Thursday. The former prime minister was barred from holding office for 10 years. That's Imran Khan. New York Fashion Week begins Friday, and Saturday is the start of the Lunar New Year, if you care about that. But now it's time to get to some audio clips I have for you. And last night was the Grammy Awards, so I thought we could start with that, end with some jokes from Saturday Night Live, which was live this weekend, and in between get to the more frustrating, depressing, scary shit. But let's start with Trevor Noah, who last night, I guess he was the host of the Grammys. I wasn't really paying attention, but then I started getting texts. Here's Trevor Noah, the host of the show, referencing the entire controversy around Taylor Swift and how the cameras always cut to her at the football games. Well, there was a football player / actor in the audience, so Taylor Swift there last night up for a record amount of Grammys, apparently a big deal. So I thought, well, I think that sets it up.
I think it is so unfair how NFL fans have been complaining about the cameras cutting to Taylor Swift, right? Like she's controlling the cameras at the games, right? Like just let her live, let her live. In fact, tonight on Taylor's behalf, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to give her a break. Every time they mention Taylor Swift, I'm going to get revenge. Every time someone says Taylor Swift, I'm going to cut the cameras to someone who played football. That's what I'll do. Cut. Bam. Just like that. Oh yeah, you like that, Terry Crews? You like that, Terry Crews? You better fix your face, Terry.
Yeah, that's how you do a joke about Taylor Swift, and nobody really gets hurt, and it's real funny, and I like it. There you go. Well, apparently Tracy Chapman got her flowers last night singing her song, and not a dry eye in the house, apparently, according to social media. I haven't seen it yet, but I can't wait to watch it when I'm done with today's podcast. Fast Car, one of my favorites of all time, and obviously controversy, ownership of that song, and well, look, what else do I have for you from the Sunday shows? Oh, this one went viral. It is on ABC's This Week. George Stephanopoulos had disgraced Senator J.D. Vance on, and you can decide why he's disgraced. There's so many reasons. One of those guys that was so heavily critical of Donald Trump and now is fully fallen in line, a total sycophant. Anyway, I think this exchange doesn't really need much of a setup, but it's great because Stephanopoulos just asks him the perfect question that he can't possibly answer. There's no answer to it, and he walks him over to the river, murders the senator, and tosses him into the river.
The Constitution also says the president must abide by legitimate Supreme Court rulings, doesn't it?
The Constitution says that the Supreme Court can make rulings, but if the Supreme Court, and look, I hope that they would not do this, but if the Supreme Court said the President of the United States can't fire a general, that would be an illegitimate ruling, and the President has to have Article 2 prerogative under the Constitution to actually run the military as he sees fit. This is just basic constitutional legitimacy. You're talking about a hypothetical where the Supreme Court tries to run the military. I don't think that's going to happen, George, but of course, if it did, the President would have to respond to it. There are multiple examples throughout American history of the President doing just that.
You didn't say military in your answer, and you've made it very clear you believe the president can defy the Supreme Court. Senator, thanks for your time this morning.
No, George.
Roundtable's up next. We'll be right back.
Well, George, I'm not done. I have a response. Nope, sorry, you're an idiot. You said it, and we're out of time. Bye-bye. I hope you can swim in that river. Man, he really just dumped him. And Kirsten Welker did a better job with Mike Johnson this time on NBC's Meet the Press, where she asked him about his previous statements when Donald Trump was being impeached about how impeachment shouldn't be a partisan process. She plays the clips of him saying that, and then she lets him dangle by his own length of rope.
This is, you were, as you just said, a part of President Trump's defense team at his first impeachment. Here's what you had to say about impeachment back then.
The founders of this country warned against single-party impeachments. The founders of this country warned us against a single-party impeachment. The founders of this country warned against a single-party impeachment. You know why? You guys know why. Because they feared it would bitterly and perhaps irreparably divide our nation.
What changed, Mr. Speaker?
Nothing. Nothing's changed. I would repeat the same refrain over and over because facts are stubborn things and they do not change. The Constitution does not change. Impeachment power is probably the heaviest power that the House of Representatives is given in the Constitution. Next to the declaration of war, you can argue it's the most serious power we have. And it's not to be used for partisan political purposes. That is exactly what they did for Donald Trump.
How is this
they telegraphed
different?
they were going to impeach
Speaker,
Donald Trump before he even took his oath of office.
If that's the case, then how is this moment different now?
Kristen, in many ways. Let me explain the many ways. For one, the House has methodically, slowly, deliberately gone through the impeachment process.
Of course they haven't. Of course they didn't go through the impeachment process slowly and methodically. The whole thing's been a partisan exercise as the result of an order from their dear leader. I mean, they're only impeaching Biden because Trump is demanding it. So back to the tape.
Impeachment inquiry, impeachment investigation on Mayorkas and President Biden himself. We've involved 3 different committees of jurisdiction, judiciary, oversight, ways and means.
Yes, they've used the full court press. And by the way, the chairman of those committees are all Republicans, and they're definitely dominated by the ones that think the earth is flat, the moon is made of cheese. But tell me again how nonpartisan you are.
We have followed the facts where they have led, not for political purposes, not because we take pleasure in this. It's, again, a heavy thing to look at the impeachment of a president or a cabinet secretary, but these facts require it. The House of Representatives has the constitutional responsibility of impeachment, and that begins with the investigation, and it must be very carefully, methodically done in a nonpartisan manner. That's exactly what the House Republican majority has done here, and it is exactly the opposite of what the House Democrats did in the previous administration. That is a fact, and we can follow those facts and understand them for what they are.
We're watching, and your stupid impeachments are going nowhere and will be complete failures, and they will be exactly as they are being seen, as partisan charades, manufactured bullshit that they have been doing since Barack Obama was the president and they had the power in the House investigative committees. It's always the same stuff. Chasing ghosts, creating nonsensical controversies that aren't even happening. It's happening right now in my town over the LGBT issues. It's absolutely crazy, but we see it all the time. And then they have no evidence for their claims, and that's exactly where this is going. Always started and is and will end with zero evidence for their Benghazi bullshit. All right, how about this one? This is the former mayor of New Orleans. I love Mitch Landrieu. I've talked to him a couple times, hung out with him, and at the Aspen Ideas Festival. And he is President Biden's campaign co-chair, always great on television. He was on NBC yesterday, and he was praising Fox News' Larry Kudlow's basic apology about his doomsday economic predictions. So we like that.
To Larry Kudlow talking about his once predictions for this economy.
Mea culpa, I was wrong about the slowdown in the recession. So was the entire
I don't think you were wrong.
Forecasting fraternity.
That's not the word.
Well, the Fed, everyone was wrong.
I mean,
everybody.
He was wrong, and that seems particularly relevant because you have this new Moody analytics report coming out saying, questioning sort of who the next president will be. On the margin, political factors favor Trump's candidacy, while economic factors favor Biden's. I wonder if that is how you are looking at it inside the campaign.
Well, Alicia, let me just say this. First of all, Larry, thank you for saying that. I wish more people would step up to the plate. And it really is a response to Michael's previous questions. One of the reasons why people have doubts is because for the last year, every major economist basically, put their foot on Joe Biden's head and said, what he's doing is wrong. We're going to have a recession. We're not going to have economic growth. There's no way that you can have a soft landing. And of course, the president has proved everybody wrong. We have the strongest economy in the world. Now, we know that prices are still high. That's why the president's fighting with the pharmaceutical industries to lower prescription costs. That's why he's made sure he put a cap on the amount of money that people have to pay for their prescriptions and gotten the cost of insulin down. That's why he's fighting those fights every day. But it is absolutely true that there has been a huge amount of hand-wringing and bedwetting that has turned out to be completely wrong, not just a little bit wrong. And I think Joe Biden is going to be proven right. And I think that, as I have said, this is going to lead to his reelection because this is literally about saving our democracy and then lifting up everybody from the bottom up in the middle out so that everybody is involved in this great American dream because diversity is our strength. Our indivisibility is our strength. Joe Biden understands that. He is in the moment, and I think he's going to do much better than everybody has expected him to do.
All right, Mitch Landrieu does a pretty good job as a Biden surrogate, so I wanted to play that for you, hear that point of view. And now here's Al Gore. He was on with Christiane Amanpour on CNN International. And I don't know how I feel about this answer he gives about those who support Donald Trump. Take a listen.
This year is a year of elections all over the world. The most people, in recorded history will be going to elections, including in your country. Can I ask you then, because, there's a lot of narrative in the air about Biden and a lot of sort of almost premature fatalism about a Trump victory. What should they be saying to counter really Trump, who is a bigger master of the public information space and the information wars?
Well, Trump's mastery has been in doubt in the last couple of weeks with confusing Nancy Pelosi with Nikki Haley and confusing other things. And I think, I don't want to get into talking about him. I respect his supporters, and I think it's really important in this campaign season for people to maintain respect for his supporters. Many of them are using Trump as a vehicle to express their anger at how they don't think things have been going in the right direction.
And by the way, the reason why I don't buy that to me just irked me. And it's not because I don't agree with other people. It's not because I can't understand where they're coming from. I can't respect them. I can't feel that way about them if they're taking people's rights, if they're taking my daughter's rights, if they're taking people's right to vote. That's not something that many of us are willing to be able to have, I don't know, enough compassion to find that you can respect that person. I just often can't get there myself. But I digress and want Al Gore to go on because he does have some more interesting things to say here, even though I thought that was a fairly putrid point.
But to answer your question, Christiane, I think that more and more people are just now beginning to wake up to the fact that things are beginning to go in the right direction. Inflation has come down dramatically. Now, the political influence is still there, but 10 months from now, if the trend continues, inflation may not be an issue. Employment is at all-time record high levels. The unemployment has been at record lows. Inequality is being reduced, and the wages are going up faster in the lowest income brackets. That's something many of us have wanted and worked for a long time. The presidency is a team sport, Christiane, and this team that President Biden has recruited is one of the best, if not the best, I think we have ever seen in the United States. And the president personally is the leader of that team. And I really believe that for those who have been feeling despair about his prospects, be of good cheer. In my time in politics, I ran for president twice, ran for vice president twice. One of the things that I've learned is that 10 months is a long time, and it's a mistake to look at polls almost a year before the election. And by the way, even the polls are beginning to change.
All right, there you go. Al Gore on CNN International yesterday. So I thought his optimism and analysis there at the end, I agreed with, was more accurate. But let's go over to MSNBC, where Ayman Mouhideen had political commentator, Democratic strategist Amisha Cross on to talk about the results of the South Carolina primary that Joe Biden got over 90% of the vote on.
Same question to you. Where does the campaign go from here, both in the rest of the primary calendar as well as the inevitable matchup between Joe Biden and Donald Trump?
He messages his accomplishments. He talks about the changes that were necessary post-COVID-19. He talks about the record unemployment. He talks about the economic condition of this nation. And quite frankly, he bets on black. What we've learned time and time again is that black people are like the Avengers. They will come and they will save our democracy over and over again, regardless of how bad, in many cases, that democracy has mistreated us. I think that he hones in the message. He reaches out to diverse groups, and he makes sure that he elevates the very people who have saved him time and time again. And that's black voters across this country.
Yeah, love that fire from Amisha Cross on MSNBC yesterday. And now let's wrap it up right now with some laughs. Brought to you by the writers and performers over at Saturday Night Live's Weekend Update. It's time for Michael Che and Colin Jost to give us some laughs after all that news.
Well, just hours ago, President Biden won the South Carolina Democratic primary, barely edging out his closest rival, Time.
It's an hourglass picture.
As you may have seen on your aunt's Facebook, many MAGA personalities are claiming that the Super Bowl is being rigged so that Kansas City wins and Taylor Swift can come onto the field with Travis Kelce and endorse Joe Biden. Man, MAGA people have so many enemies to keep track of. You have to hate the NFL, Taylor Swift, Bud Light, Disney, Kristen Stewart for some reason, electric stoves, windmills, the concept of rainbows, and the green M&M. And you have to think that everybody in the government is a secret pedophile except for this guy dancing with Jeffrey Epstein.
Donald Trump.
I mean, isn't that the happiest you've ever seen Trump? He's dancing like nobody's checking IDs.
Hey, President Biden made a drastic change in his immigration policy, saying he would be willing to shut down the border if given the power by Congress. It's the kind of unexpected shift in direction Biden usually only makes in the middle of a sentence. The Biden campaign is trying to appeal to black voters as polls show their support for Biden has declined. It's getting so bad, he now only has support from Obama's white half. Did you guys all forget?
In some great economic news for President Biden, U.S. oil production hit an all-time high this week, and the economy added a surprisingly robust 350,000 jobs. Or, as Fox News reported it, are migrants turning your kids trans?
All right, there you go. Saturday Night Live Weekend Update. Colin Jost and Michael Che. I love it. I always love that. And that's why I share it with you. Some laughs here at the end of the news segment. Now let's get to my conversation with Jared Yates Sexton, shall we? He is, until recently, was a professor, a creative writing professor, an academic. He's written several books, including The Man They Wanted Me to Be, Toxic Masculinity, and A Crisis of Our Own Making. He followed that up with his bestseller, which really put him on the map, American Rule, How a Nation Conquered the World But Failed Its People. And his newest book has also been a big hit. It's called The Midnight Kingdom, A History of Power, Paranoia, and the Coming Crisis. His Substack, also very popular. Check that out at Dispatches from a collapsing state. JaredYatesSexton.substack.com. And listen to the podcast that he co-hosts with Nick Hanauer. It's called The Muckrake Podcast, and I know a lot of you listen to that as well as this. And you can support Jared at Substack, at Patreon, and on social media where he is a monster as well on Twitter. So check him out. Let him know that you appreciate when he joins me, and you get to meet him if you're in Vegas, because we, at the top of our conversation, announced that he's going to be there officially. He's going to be there Friday night hosting a talk. So we hope that you will get to meet Jared and see him in Las Vegas, March 22nd, 23rd as well. Let's do it right now. Jared Yates Sexton. Jared Yates Sexton, there he is. Been way too long. Ladies and gentlemen, he is officially going to be joining us in Vegas, a live bourbon talk with Jared Yates Sexton, which he normally does on YouTube. We are very excited to make the announcement that you'll be joining the stand-up PodJam. We are very honored. Thank you.
There's a reason they call it Sin City. Am I right?
Wait, that's why you're going? So that you can behave poorly?
No, listen, I'm going to be honest.
It's all your morals so you can pay for sex? I don't think you need to do that. I think you're good enough and charismatic enough and you're a well-known man. I don't think, but whatever. If you like that, that's fine. You know, people need to earn.
I'm not a Vegas guy.
Yeah, me neither.
I got stuck in Vegas once. I had a car. I was on like the Kerouac road trip to the West Coast. And this was when I was like 19, had no money. I was with a buddy of mine, and like we got stuck in Vegas for a week, no money. It was an absolute nightmare. But here's the thing, Pete. I believe that the world can change. This is going to change my entire perspective on Las Vegas. I'm ready to go.
No. That's it won't, and it shouldn't. Let's not get carried away. The only reason it's in Vegas is because we have these amazing, generous people, specifically Cassie, out in Vegas, who produces this whole event and wants to add something cool to it, and asked us. That's why we're there. Like, I don't think Vegas should exist. I've been really clear about that. There's no reason for all that electricity and water to be there in the middle of the desert. There's no reason for humans to have created a city there. But hey, listen, happy to be invited and to join. And a lot of good people.
I'm going to hang out with you. I'm going to watch NCAA games and make bets in seedy places. I'm ready for it. I'm ready.
Why do you only gamble in seedy places and not the higher end places?
Well, I mean, it's the song of my people. Like, I don't want to be somewhere where God can see me. I don't want to be somewhere where a church lady might walk in and say, Jared Yates Sexton, what is this? I don't need it.
I understand. And I applaud it. And I look forward to being with you in some of those seedy places, watching you lose your money on basketball.
On basketball, that's right. And by the way, I'm just going to stop it right there. You look forward to being with me. That's all. That's all I need.
I do. Have we ever met in person?
We have not.
No, I don't think we have.
Pete.
Yeah. How tall are you?
In my dreams, we've never met before.
Well, that's a whole nother podcast. It's a new podcast I'm launching. Guess I haven't met except for in my dreams.
That's not a bad podcast. Yeah, and every episode starts with, I had a dream about you last night. And then let the tension build.
All of my dreams about you're just warning me what's about to happen. What's that about?
Listen, I've got a bad rap. I understand this. Like, I have conversations sometimes. I'll get interviewed by someone like from England or Australia, and they'll start and they'll be like, you say troubling things. And I'm like, I'm an enjoyable person. I can't wait for people to be around me and be like, oh, wow, you're not like a total buzzkill.
Ladies and gentlemen, the joyless Jared Yates Sexton.
I have so much joy. I have so much joy in my heart, and I'm ready to spread it all over the show.
I'm ready. It'll be weird, though, because when listeners finally meet you, they're going to want to ask you about the issues that we talk about. And I hope that, they'll be open to just us hanging and having a good time and us getting to know them. I like to turn around because they always know everything about you. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to meeting you in real life, to having a drink with you, to having you on my show, to watching you do yours. And hopefully it looks like Friday night you're going to be hosting like an hour for people to just bourbon. And
I got to tell you, I am not used to people wanting to spend Friday nights with me, but I'm all for it. Let's do it.
Awesome. All right. So there's Vegas. And now I want to ask you, before we get into your work and thoughts about important things, before I hit record, you notice my dog behind me. And then you made me aware of the fact, I had not heard that there's a new drug being developed that could extend the lives of dogs. And I looked it up. I was like, you'd be kidding me. I looked it up, and the FDA has approved this medication that extends the lifespan of dogs. CBS News, New York Times, USA Today, multiple outlets reporting this. That's exciting. You want to buy some. You want to be a salesman.
I'm buying this stock. This is not an advisement. Would you sell it
on the Muckrake podcast? Would you sell the drug?
Alex Jones can sell his dick pills. I'm going to sell life extension pills for dogs.
If you want your dog to live longer, here's what you got to do.
It's a lot like Old Yeller, only better. Okay, so the story, real fast, I'll tell you this quick story. So I have about once a month, I wake up at 4 a.m. It's always like 4:05, and I can't get back to sleep, right? A heavy mind, a heavy world. And I go downstairs and I have to look at some stuff trying to calm down. I found this story one of those nights, and it soothed my soul. It was such a balm because, as I said to you, I have a little chai weenie. Her name is Betsy Pearl. She is.
I thought you were talking about. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
She is the sweetest thing in the world. I need her to live 30, 40, 50 years. I'm going to be in line for this like an idiot waiting on Apple goggles. I'm ready.
That's
ready to make it happen.
Your Apple goggles are the dog longevity drug. I like that.
That's exactly right. That is the only thing I care about right now.
When you wake up at 4 a.m. or whatever time it is in the middle of the night with those kinds, it's a very common thing. And you just kind of glossed over what you do to deal with that. And I kind of actually want to know, what do you say? I usually get up and I go look at some things. So you mean you look at your computer, your phone, the news, or you?
It depends. I go down. I used to look at the news, which my therapist has told me. Not the best strategy. Turns out not good for you. Recently, it's reading, it's playing the guitar, it's something along those lines at this point. Yeah.
Good. Because you want to be able to manage it, and everybody has their.
We have to get better about this. Eventually, at some point, we have to recognize these cycles. So yeah, I'm having to work on that. It used to be doom scrolling. I'm not going to lie to you. It used to be sitting there and doom scrolling.
Yeah. Well, that's, I'm glad that you've got that, and I'm always interested in asking people about that. All right, let me ask you about what's happening in the world. We haven't talked in too long. It's happened again. And there's a lot that has transpired over time. You've been writing a lot. You and Nick have been doing a lot of great work over at the Muckrake podcast. I just listened to, and I was really interested. I mentioned this news story, and you guys went deeper into it, but a MAGA guy or some right-wing conspiracy theorist killed his father.
Yes.
And then chopped his dad's head off and held it up on camera. I should have warned people I was about to say that. It's pretty gruesome, pretty awful, ghoulish. And you seem to think that's a sign of a harbinger of other things. And I can't disagree, but because of the guy's angle and his theories and the fact that the reason he killed his dad apparently because he's a federal government worker and he hates the government. So what do you want to say about that? Are we overplaying that incident? Are we underplaying it? I don't think we're going to see a lot of people killing their own parents because they work for the other side or seen, but I don't know. I mean, we've seen some of it.
Well, Sigmund Freud could not be reached for comment. I mean, that's the whole thing here really is. And so I've been doing this research on this new project that's talking about the mental health crisis component of our political and cultural crisis. And one of the things that I've come to believe is that there are a lot of unhappy Americans, a lot of really, really unhealthy, unhappy Americans. This guy, I could say his name, but let's not do it. His background, I don't know if people have paid attention to this. This is a really unwell person who's been on this for a long time. He sued the federal government because he's a white man who couldn't get a job with his student loans. And then on top of that, he self-published a bunch of novels that are letters to Donald Trump. He tried to have a musical career. Eventually he killed his father, saying that he was a traitor. And one of the things that's happening here, Nick, oh my God, that's that's such a usual cadence for me.
Did you just tape a podcast with Nick?
No, that's I gotta work on that. That's like an automatic movement there. So one of the things that's happening here, Pete, is that a lot of people have gotten involved in politics and have gotten absolutely outraged and radicalized by it because the right wing, Trumpism, MAGA, whatever you want to call it, it acts on those feelings, right? The entire point of MAGA is it's an unhealthy death cult in which basically Donald Trump, who is one of the most unwell human beings that we've ever seen in the United States culture, is basically telling people, hey, those paranoid feelings you have, that anger you have, that aggrievement that you have. Guess what? you're right. You're not racist. You're not sexist. You're not misogynist. You're not xenophobic. Actually, you are correct.
Yeah.
And that's catnip for people who are not well. And so we have an entire political movement that is actually an expression of unwellness in this country. And the problem here is, and Pete, you've seen this for years now. We've seen Trump supporters killing people, hurting people, terrorizing people, harassing people. And I look at this, and I've done this research on like past, fascistic authoritarian movements. You see this stuff before the actual thing shows up, before it manifests. These people who are deeply unwell, and this person's obviously deeply unwell, they hear the fear mongering. They hear the calls. They hear all of this talk. And I would argue that instead of like being lone nuts or lone wolves, they actually understand what's being communicated by Trump and Republicans, which is, you know what, this thing might get bloody. And we might have to hurt some people. And I think we all recognize that at this point. It's taken a while for Americans to figure it out. But I think these people are ahead of the curve in terms of what's being promoted here.
One of the things I think that's all really smart, but one of the things I feel like I've seen change, and Vivek Ramaswamy has really been able to do this, and Donald Trump obviously has led on this, is you have these folks, truthfully, you could say any kind of influencer or any kind of radio host, where they are able to say the craziest things, and a lot of people believe them for any number of reasons.
Yep.
And it's just gotten more crazy, where they basically like, let me just see if this works. Let me just go say that the Super Bowl is going to be rigged by Joe Biden and for Taylor Swift to announce an endorsement, whatever that theory is that Vivek Ramaswamy has put out there. It sounds to me like a writing staff at a sitcom or a television show pitching different ideas or screenplays. Let me see if this works, because it's so preposterous that but the point is, it does work. Like the fact that people buy into so much of these things is almost as a result of the fact that there are those who are so shameless that they will sell them. And that seems like a development in the past several years. And certainly Trump and Alex Jones and other right-wing talkers for sure, I feel like have been leading that. How new is that? Do you think that's what's happening? I mean, this suggestion from Vivek and others that these things that are going to happen, by the way, that never happen most of the time. And then they still have credibility, I guess, the people who predict them.
Well, I think one of the amazing misunderstandings that we have is, and we look at, again, fascism, Nazism, authoritarianism, we think people are being brainwashed. You know what I mean? That they're being told something and being convinced of it. That's not actually what's occurring here. People are being told what they want to hear. So, for instance, like with this whole Super Bowl, Taylor Swift, Travis Kelce thing, you have millions of Americans who hate Taylor Swift. They see her as the antithesis of everything that they believe. On top of that, never ever underestimate how much people hate seeing other people happy. Like, listen, I personally, and you've heard me critique corporations and capitalism time and time again. Am I annoyed that they basically have gotten together and it's turned into like sort of a joint PR corporate campaign? Absolutely. But guess what? I think those crazy kids are in love. And you know what? I'm happy for them. I actually am. I see that and I'm like, oh, that's nice. Other people see it and they hate it. You know what I mean? They don't want to see other people happy. And on top of that, they long for a world that makes sense to them and basically tells them what they want to believe, which is, oh my God, I didn't want this team to win. I don't like this person. I don't like the person they're with. It's a lot easier to believe it's a conspiracy. Because otherwise you have to start asking a question, Pete, which is it me that is wrong or is it the children? And eventually what you have to understand is, oh my God, there's something in me that is projecting out into all of this and finding all this, terrible. What has happened throughout history is that there are moments where things get so tenuous and so weird that you have charlatans like a Vivek, who, by the way, Vivek is scary as hell.
Oh, yeah. I find him to be extremely influential. I really feel that people have underestimated him. Go ahead.
I agree. And by the way, if he ends up Trump's running mate, God help us all. But I think Trump was one of the original ones. I think the Republicans flirted with it for a long time. Or Rush Limbaugh did this his entire career and made God knows how much.
For sure.
But basically, you have people come along and they say, guess what? You're not wrong. Here are the things that are happening. And it doesn't matter if it's Jews, the deep state, Hillary Clinton, Pizzagate, whatever it is. It's a thing that people want to believe. And as a result, it doesn't matter how insane it is. It doesn't matter how weird it is, how irrational it is. All of a sudden, the snowball starts going. And guess what? You have a ton of people who are doing this now. Trump, Vivek, oh man, help me out here. Andrew Tate, right? There's a whole group of people that are just fomenting this feeling that people already have and growing it. And they're making a ton of money. They're gaining a ton of power from it, but it makes it worse and it makes it worse.
Sometimes what I hear you say is that people have real problems.
Yes.
But they turn to charlatans who tell them that the root of your problem is this over here, when in fact there is a problem.
Yes.
But it's not what you're being told by that guy. He's just blaming somebody else or some other cause for any number of reasons we could look into. And I also feel like that in addition to that, it's not only, yes, I'm suffering, I have problems, financial, health, whatever. I'm looking for somebody or something to blame, and there may be somebody or something to blame. That's fine. The worst thing now, though, except when you go to the wrong, obviously, root of the problem, but now it's people are upset right now in my town. At the school board this week, we will have a very loud group of people, threatening, menacing people, screaming about something, Jared, that isn't happening. Right. So in that case, there isn't a problem, and yet they're screaming about it. And that, to me, is so much more insidious than there's a problem, you're being told the wrong root of it. But in this case, there isn't even that issue. We don't have the issue that they're screaming about, that trans kids are going in the locker rooms of other kids to look at them. It's not a thing, but they're making, or that parents aren't being told that their kids are using different pronouns. Again, not a thing, but there's a policy in place that says if a kid is terrified that if their parent finds out, then we're going to take a look at that one situation. But normally, again, if your kid's using different pronouns and you don't know, you're a shitty parent. You're not paying attention to your child. But my point is that one's so much worse. Problems that don't exist, yet people are there with pitchforks at the board meeting.
Yeah, why are kids growing their hair long and listening to this rock and roll? Like it must be Satan. It must be the communist. It's the exact same story over and over. Like, to go ahead and I'll try and make this as brief as possible. What has happened in this country is that there was an economic movement, call it neoliberalism, hypercapitalism, whatever it is. It hollowed out America. It made people's lives worse. And also, by the way, it installed in Americans a spiritual crisis of selfishness, isolation, selfishness, consumerism, you name it. That's how this entire system is.
And maybe a lack of purpose because your job was gone.
Exactly. So we get to this point where the same people who did that, the same people who made trillions of dollars off of that, are now funding MAGA. They're now funding. And by the way, what you just brought up with the school board, none of that's organic. People didn't get together and like, oh my God, I think this is happening. That was created by think tanks and institutes who are being funded by the exact same people who caused this crisis going back decades ago. So now you have MAGA, you have Trumpism, you have right-wing authoritarianism, Christian nationalism, whatever you want to call it. It's a faux populist movement that was created by the same people who caused the problem in the first place. Right. And guess what you do? You go ahead and you create a faux populist movement, which gets people pissed off again about Jews, the deep state, gay, trans people, people of color, women, you name it, the internet, woke corporations. Yeah. And what does that do, Pete? It keeps us from talking about what has actually happened. What is so incredibly powerful and insidious about it, and I do all my research and I do all my work outside of podcasting and writing, working against this thing. If it wasn't so dangerous, you would have to stand back and sort of admire it. It's so genius what has been done here. So instead of talking about, hey, should we have more funding for schools? Of course we should. Should we support teachers? Of course we should. Should we be worried about the mental health crisis among our children? Of course we should. Instead of that, gay, trans, panic, groomers, kindergartners using litter boxes, you name it. So what has actually happened is we have this entire distraction movement that goes ahead and moves the anger from the people who deserve it to the people who have actually been victimized the entire time. That's how authoritarianism always works. And it works. That's the problem. If you know what's happening, you can fix it, but it takes a minute.
Yeah, it takes more than a minute. And more than that, I feel like sometimes you can't fix it. It's really hard. I'm thinking again around what's happening locally. I think that's the easiest thing to have an impact on local issues. And yet it's very hard when you're up against, as we are in my town, a guy who will exploit people's fears, make stuff up without any shame, and also basically act criminal-like and destroy people's reputations and attack people. And it's really hard to combat because people are scared. They're scared to show up. They're scared to say anything. And that is true across this country, at school boards, at town halls, and, in so many other spaces and places. The people are afraid. The good people are afraid. I am always motivated by and feel, a certain sense of guilt with the simple, as Dr. King said, the ultimate tragedy, not the oppression, is not the oppression and cruelty by the bad people, but the silence over that by the good people. In the end, we'll remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. I wake up to that ringing in my head, and it motivates me so much. I can't be silent. My kids are fine, but we're in good shape, but everybody's so scared to be targeted that they don't speak up. It'll always be the problem, which is why he said that so long ago. This is not a new diagnosis, and that's what I struggle with.
Yeah, and that's one of the bigger problems that we have right now, which is there's so many different fronts on this fight. One, you have to educate people on what's going on. Because when I work in so-called red states and I talk with organizers on the ground, they don't even know what we just talked about, right? They're in a fight for their lives and their careers. They're exhausted, Pete. They want to give up their jobs. They want to move away. They're like, I can't even save this state. I can't keep my kids safe. On top of that, I'm constantly being harassed. I'm being targeted, which is part of this thing. It's the stochastic terrorism part of it. Yeah. You have people who should be running for office who don't want to because they're going to be attacked and harassed. You have people who want to get on school boards. They don't want to do it. People who want to work in elections. They don't want to do it because it's dangerous, right? We're supposed to get in our heads, hey, if I went out on the streets like I did in 2020 with BLM, am I going to get shot? Am I going to get arrested? Am I going to lose my job? Right? That's the side part of this. But meanwhile, what's happening in the middle, and this has been in America, go back to the civil rights movement. Everyone thinks what happened was that Martin Luther King gave a speech and everybody came to their minds. That's not what happened. What happened was the white moderate liberal in this country, who, by the way, didn't want black people to be oppressed. They didn't feel like they were racist, but at the same time, they weren't confronted with their privilege and what was going on. They turned on their TVs and all of a sudden they're watching people get beaten on bridges, people getting sprayed with fire hoses, attacked with dogs and by police. And suddenly they had a moment where they were like, holy hell, this is the basis of my life. I have to make a decision. Do I want to be a part of this, or does something need to change? And
isn't that exactly what happened? You're talking about Selma and Dr. King and John Lewis and so on, and people saw it on televised for this. Isn't that the exact same thing? We're not the first. I'm not the first to make the connection. George Floyd. We watched that too. We were all home in this weird way because of the pandemic, and we saw that, and we reacted to that. And white allies joined a growing civil rights movement called Black Lives Matter. And then what happened? Then it ended. It got too far. People got scared and became the white lash. And it's such is the state of our country always. And as you write this tweet, I'm not sure if you wrote more about it in an article at your Substack, but you wrote, just to note that part of our problem as a culture is a lack of cohesive understanding of history, terms, and concepts, which I fully agree with. But then you write this, and I want to flesh this out. You write, it's an intentional failure of education that's meant to keep us in the dark and ignorant of what's going on. The sooner we realize this, the better. So I wanted you to expand on that, because when you say it's the intentional failure of education, I think, if I were writing curriculum, I'd do it a lot differently. But I do think there's a lot of amazing things in our public education. So I want some nuance with your criticism there, and tell me what you think, what you mean by the intentional failure of our education.
Well, I want to make it very, very clear. I'm not talking about educators. Educators have been involved in a bare knuckle all out war that has gone on for decades. Public education has been attacked since desegregation. And that is, again, by the exact same people who fund MAGA, who fund Trumpism, you name it. Teachers have been trying to keep the lights on. And by the way, I'm a former academic. I left academia after being there for 16 years. And I left in part, Pete, because, you know what they do? They overload you. They make sure that you have too many responsibilities. You don't get paid enough. By the way, you're completely vulnerable. People are going to harass you, go after you. On top of that, they're going to make your life miserable until you have to make a decision, which is, am I going to continue within this? So what has happened is that teachers have been they've had to buy their own supplies for decades now. They've had too many kids, too many responsibilities. They're exhausted. Yeah, they're trying to keep going. Meanwhile, what has happened is that, like Pac-Man munching on pellets, you've had that same wealth class that has funded Trumpism and MAGA that have found every chance that they can to massage the curriculum, to make sure we don't talk about slavery, we don't talk about the civil rights movement, we don't talk about gay liberation. In fact, we don't even want to admit that gay people exist. Right? We don't want to talk about how women have been treated, how free speech has been treated. We don't want people understanding the Constitution. We don't want them understanding authoritarianism. We sure shit don't want them understanding capitalism. So what we do is we create a curriculum that obfuscates that. It's not that the teachers have been a part of this. They've been shut out of it. And if you take a look at any university, the teachers are not part of the governance. They are part of a class that is trying to survive while the people above them who believe in the stuff that we're talking about right now, that obfuscation, they've gone ahead and made sure that education in this country has gotten worse and worse and worse. And most people, they want to be left alone. What we just talked about with that introspection, that looking in the mirror and thinking about your part in things, that's hard. That's hard as hell. And if you're barely scraping by yourself, you're working 80 hours a week and like required overtime, you're not getting paid enough, you're falling behind, that introspection is really, really difficult. It's a lot easier to say, I'm not part of the problem. I'm going to elect this guy. He'll take care of it for me.
Yeah, no, just to be clear, I should always say that like getting involved and being a part of the fight is sometimes the luxury people have with privilege. And certainly if you're the target, often you get involved just to survive, as people often have. But like, you know, if you got a lot going on and you're working, it's hard to be thinking of anything else, but just getting through the day. And I always want to acknowledge that. Let me ask you about media criticism. You talk a lot about missing the warning signs and, you know, media doing a disservice. And I always like to drill down who we're talking about in terms of what's happening right now with this presidential campaign. A lot of people are criticizing some of the legacy traditional corporate media for not framing it right, for not writing the right headlines, for doing false equivalencies and leaving out a certain sense of moral clarity and objectivity to get clicks and so on. I've said all these kind of cliche criticisms, all of which are accurate. What are you thinking about and writing about when it comes to how the media is handling this presidential campaign, the court, the legal issues of President Trump, or anything else?
You know, it's a really complicated subject. We could spend hours talking about this. I'll go ahead and try and boil this down as well as I can. There are so many different interlocking motivators at play here. You have a lot of people within our corporate media who come from a place of privilege. I mean, listen, I noticed something for myself. The moment that I started turning my eye towards capitalism, I realized I wasn't going on those networks anymore. You know what I mean? Like they don't want you to get on and talk about capitalism or neoliberalism. You know, people are going to turn the channel or they don't want to do it. Meanwhile, that introspection that we're talking about, a lot of people don't want to look at the fact that it costs a lot of money to live in New York City or Washington, D.C. and get paid meager wages as a journalist. That's intentional. And basically, people have had to have their own income that comes from the privilege of the money that they came from in their family in order to supplement what they're getting paid in the media. That was part of a larger process. It's not like they get up in the morning and they're like, oh, man, I'm going to help Donald Trump by doing this thing. But they have a system that they have benefited from. They have faith in. On top of that, they think that the left, talking about redistribution or changing things or whatever, that they're dangerous. They think that the right is equally dangerous. This is what we see. I always talk about David Brooks. He is the perfect example of this. He wants everyone to shut up so he can get back to living his normal life. He's so tired of hearing what both sides have to say. And so what we're getting now is we're getting a media that can't report on this thing because they can't see it. They don't have the capability of it. There are people who can, and they're fine with it. A lot of people really do support Donald Trump. They don't like the way he presents the things that he says, right? But economically, politically, culturally, they're there, but they don't want to be associated with Donald Trump. That's D-Class A. But you have a lot of other people who are moderates who are fine moving a little bit rightward. That's the way this thing always works, but they're not able to see the actual nature of the problem because they're within the problem.
So often they're within the problem and it's hard to see. I agree. But I do think that this time around, all of the warnings that people like you were making about corporate media not treating Trump the same way, I think have been largely heeded. And I think a lot of that has to do with January 6th and the crime that everybody saw him commit and so on, these federal indictments and everything. But I do see a lot of even the corporate media, the CNNs, the New York Times, treating him differently this time, not carrying him live, having definite I think, stark editorial standards of what they will allow and not allow, election deniers and so on. Do you think it's different this time around in terms of how they're covering him and if it is better?
This winter, weird winter. I was in Iowa when it was negative 25 real temperature. And right now it's 40 degrees. It feels like summer outside. It's still cold. You know what I mean? Like, it's still chilly. I would say that it has gotten better, but it's nowhere near where it needs to be. I think you and I both saw after January 6th, like, we watched an attempted coup, an insurrection take place live on our televisions and live on our phone screens. People took it seriously for a few hours, and then the next day they were like, I don't think it was that big of a deal. And I don't think Trump could possibly do this, and I don't think Trump could get in office and do this. I still see a large part of people, and there are economic and political incentives. Listen, I understand that back in 2016, 2017, when I was screaming, like, I might have sounded like a loon to people. I get that. I understand that. You don't need me going again on CNN and be like, authoritarianism, everybody, neo-fascism, right? Like, I understand. Right.
I don't know
That's
why
not right. That's not what people want on their television screens. And so as a result, you have economic incentives to play this down, to be more, quote unquote, rational or not talk about these things. So I think there are all kinds of things that keep us from fully having a media or a political class that can fully reckon with this thing. But that being said, I agree some things are better, and it has gotten better. But at the same time, it's a really bad situation.
All right. So I just want to ask you about your thoughts on what's happening with all of Trump's crimes and how you think they resonate in the culture and in the country. And if you think they are persuading people one way or another, and how you see this all playing out in our justice system. Anything about that?
Well, I want to say one thing to begin. I think our framing of the 2024 election is a little bit off. I think we're talking about who's going to win the electoral count. What we learned in 2020 is it doesn't matter if Donald Trump wins an election or not. He's going to say he won an election. If he lost it, he's going to claim it was stolen. God knows what happens after that. Also, by the way, I don't know if you paid attention or your listeners have. The Supreme Court was stolen. I don't know if you've heard about this. And we're also 24 years removed from watching a presidential election stolen, in broad daylight. So I always like to go ahead and start with that. The second thing about it is that I all of us are disgusted by Donald Trump. The people who are listening to this, I can't imagine you have a listener who is just like, you know what? I kind of like his vibe. People are not turned off by this who are going to vote for him. They see it as proof that the deep state is coming after him. They see it that he is being persecuted. They feel as if they themselves are being persecuted. The deep state is taking away their voice. I will say this, though. I went and saw him in Iowa. I went to a rally in Iowa. I got pretty close to him. He looks like shit, Pete. He looks, and I've seen this guy plenty of times. I've been around Donald Trump plenty of times. He looks bad. And so I always like to remind people that this is a person who's not taking care of themselves. He's going around the country, campaigning for president. Yeah. He's also taking care of over 91 indictments. If you came back from the future and told me he didn't make it to November, I would not be shocked.
I
really wouldn't.
Thank you. But if he dies of natural causes, the conspiracies will be just...
It will never end. He could live to 98 and die, right. Elvis style on a toilet.
And like killed him.
They did it. They finally did it. They've been wanting to do it for years. But I'm telling you, these things, they make a difference to the people who care. I don't know what's going to happen in terms of whether or not he'll be allowed on the ballot. Everyone says to me, obviously the Supreme Court will rule in his favor. I don't think that's for sure. I do not. I think it's likely.
Yeah, pretty likely, I think.
I think it's likely, but I don't think it's a slam dunk. I mean, establishment Republicans do not care for them. This Supreme Court, by the way, I've never seen a Supreme Court care more about public opinion, about whether or not they're seen as legitimate.
Certainly Robert cares a lot about it.
Yeah, because they're illegitimate. Let's make that fair. But I don't know what's going to happen from all this legal trouble. I'm certainly glad that, he got $83 million taken from him. I hope Jon Carroll has a semblance of peace and comfort from this. But, from all of it, I don't expect a powerful white man to be taken off a ballot, but we'll see. I don't know how this whole thing's going to play out.
No, it does. But you're one of the best people to read and listen to for analysis on it as it happens, always using history as your teacher, our teacher, and we so appreciate that. But more importantly, very excited to see you in person, is to see that you actually have a full body. How tall are you as a man?
How tall do you think I am?
I think you're 10 feet tall. Like you strike me because of your personality and because the way that I feel like you're like over 5'9".
I'm just an eyelash under 6 foot, and I'm a broad shouldered boy.
Big boy, aren't you?
Yeah, what? I'm a big boy.
Yeah. You could carry me probably.
Listen, I'll get me a couple of shots in some sports book, and we'll see what happens.
Don't you think we should charge extra for that? Like watch Jared, Yates, Sexton pick up Pete Dominic and throw him over his shoulder and carry him out, maybe.
Like a real officer and a gentleman type thing? I'm up for it.
For an extra Patreon level, you can watch the private Jared, Pete Dominic wrestling match where it's all planned beforehand, and Pete's
but also very sensual.
Yeah,
that's the other thing. It's not just planned, but it's one of those, as we wrestle, we learn to appreciate one another.
White Men Wrestling, Friday night. Come see it. It's going to be great. Jared,
I'd buy that ticket. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we'll let people decide what they want to see us do, and then we will consider it for charity. Jared,
is this OnlyFans or Patreon? What are we talking about here?
You know what? Good point. It's a good point. We'll have to see. We'll have to have a private meeting and see if we need to create an extra account. I so appreciate you, man. Thank you for joining me, and I can't wait to see you in Vegas, and we'll talk, I'm sure, lots of times between now and then.
I couldn't be more excited, man. Thanks so much.
All right, there he goes, Jared Yates Sexton. That is today's show. Can't wait to see him in Vegas. Can't wait to see you in Vegas. Go get your tickets right now at the show links, and have a great Monday. Thank you so much for supporting me in the show. If you're not, please do. Patreon.com/Pete Dominic. If you haven't already, write a rating and review on Spotify and iTunes. Subscribe on YouTube and TikTok and Threads and all the rest. And I will talk to you right here tomorrow. Jon Carroll taking us out as he does every day. Our own Grammy Award winner.
When you're tired of begging, saying pretty please, that's the time you gotta finally get up on your knees. When you can't see the forest for the burning trees, you got to stand up. Hey, you've been sitting so long, you got the creaky knees, you got to stand up. Stand up. I think you're driving wheels with leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. We got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of a stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change would begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go, and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. Alright, we got to speak up, we got to reach up, and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up, you got to good night. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up